Some memories do not belong to us. They slip into the mind like fog through a cracked window, soft and harmless at first, until you realize they were never yours to begin with. Up here in the mountains, the forest has a way of pressing truths into you, sometimes gently, sometimes like a hand against the back of your skull. And sometimes, I think, it gives you memories the way it gives you shadows, quietly, without asking permission. I never believed any of that until the night my wife told me Bigfoot whispered her name. It was early autumn when we decided to spend a long weekend at the cabin. The kind of place that looks harmless in daylight but carries a different presence once the sun drops. Moss coated the trunks of every tree. The wind hummed through the branches like a distant river. And the darkness never felt like absence. Felt like company. We sat by the wood stove playing cards. The quiet kind of evening that settles heavy and warm. The fire popped a few times, soft red sparks jumping like fireflies before dying on the stone hearth. My wife looked tired but peaceful. She had always loved the forest more than I did. Always felt more at home among the shadows. We turned in early. The night outside was still too still for the season. Usually the woods give you the sounds of owls or a distant coyote or even the soft rustle of deer passing through. That night felt sealed, as if something coaxed the world into silence. I must have been asleep for an hour when I felt her hand grip my arm. Not a gentle shake. A hard, trembling clamp that jolted me awake. She whispered my name. Not in fear at first, but in shock. I rolled over and found her sitting upright, both hands pressed against her chest as if trying to steady her heartbeat. What happened? I asked, rubbing my eyes. She swallowed hard and stared past me toward the window. Her voice cracked. Something said my name. Sleep fell away from me like a shed skin. I sat up straighter, following her line of sight. The curtains were half open, and only darkness looked back at us. A dense kind of black, heavy, watchful. You were dreaming, I said, trying to sound grounded for her sake. She shook her head so violently that her hair brushed my shoulder. No. Came from outside. From the trees. I listened then. Truly listened. The silence outside was different now. Tense. Expectant. I could feel my pulse thudding in my throat. What did it sound like? I asked quietly. She hugged her knees to her chest. Low. Like it was made of breath instead of a voice. Like it pushed the sound into me. I reached for her hand, trying to settle the panic in her eyes. I told her everything she needed to hear. That it was the wind. A dream. A trick of sleep. But my own voice sounded thin, unconvincing. Then something moved outside. Not a branch. Not an animal. The weight of the sound was wrong. Too measured. Too heavy. The soil along the side of the cabin gave a soft but undeniable thump, like a large foot settling its weight. My breath hitched. My wife's eyes snapped to mine. You heard that. Before I could answer, the second step came. Slow. Deliberate. Heavy enough that the cabin boards under the bed gave the faintest vibration. But no branches broke. No twigs snapped. Something big was walking just beyond the porch. And the forest, as if complicit, stayed perfectly silent around it. I reached for the flashlight on the nightstand, clicked it on, and stepped toward the window. My wife whispered for me to stop, but I needed to see. Needed to confront the logic that still held me together. I pushed the curtain just enough to look outside. The beam of the flashlight cut through the darkness in a narrow cone. The edge of the porch glowed pale. Beyond that, only shadows. I swept the light across the tree-line, slow and careful. The flashlight trembled in my hand. Nothing. No figure. No animal. Only moss, bark, and a stillness that did not feel natural. Then the night shifted. Not with sound. With memory. A picture flashed into my mind so vividly that I staggered backward. I saw myself as a child, no older than 8, standing in a sunlit field with my wife at my side. Except that could not be. We did not meet until our 20s. And the landscape in the memory was wrong. Too green. Too bright. Too perfect, like someone had painted it rather than lived it. I blinked hard. The image lingered behind my eyelids like an afterglow. My wife gasped softly. What did you just remember? I asked, my voice cracking. She covered her mouth. Tears pooled at the corners of her eyes. A field. You were there. We were kids. But that never happened. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered the same thing. She shook her head, curls brushing her cheeks. No, that is impossible. We could not have both imagined the same dream. I sat beside her again, the flashlight still trembling in my hand. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the thundering in my chest. Was there someone else in your memory? I asked softly. She nodded. At the edge of the woods, she whispered. The room grew colder around us. I swallowed. Tall figure, watching. Her eyes widened. Yes. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Outside, the woods remained silent. A silence that felt like a held breath. And somewhere in that silence, I began to understand something awful. Memories should not match this perfectly. Dreams should not align like reflections. And no creature should be able to whisper a name it never learned. But something did. And whatever it was, it had reached into both our minds at once. The fake memory was not fake at all. It was a message, a beginning, or worse, a reminder. And in that moment, sitting together on the edge of the bed, both of us shaking, both clutching a memory that did not belong to either of us, I knew one thing with a clarity that chilled me deeper than the night outside. Something in those trees wanted us to remember it. It is strange how silence can grow heavier in daylight. You expect the sun to scatter the fear, to pull the night away like a curtain and expose everything for what it truly is. But that morning, when the pale light filtered through the cabin windows, nothing felt clearer. If anything, things felt more distorted, as if the woods outside had decided to hold their secrets tighter now that they knew we were aware. My wife sat at the small kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee she was not drinking. Her eyes were fixed on the treeline beyond the frosted glass. I could see her lips moving slightly, rehearsing the memory in her mind the same way I was. The shared vision still clung to me, that green field, the impossible sunlight, the feeling of being watched by something too tall, too silent, too patient. Every time I closed my eyes, the image sharpened instead of fading. It did not behave like a dream. Dreams unravel with time. This one held its shape like a stone. I stepped outside to get a better sense of the forest. The air was cold enough to bite the inside of my nose. The ground was dry, soft pine needles blanketing the soil. Birds should have been singing at that hour, but the forest remained still. Not dead, just listening. I walked the perimeter of the cabin. That was when I noticed them. Wood impressions at the edge of the property. Not footprints exactly. More like disturbances in the layer of needles. Broad, evenly spaced. As if something large had circled the cabin during the night and left no trace except the subtle pressure of its steps. I knelt and brushed the area gently with my palm. The impression was deeper than it looked. Heavy weight. But nothing had broken. No branch snapped. No soil displaced. My wife stepped onto the porch. Her voice came out faint. It was here. I looked up at her. You heard something again? No, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. It is just a feeling. Like the woods remember us. Like they watched us sleep. I stood and walked toward her. Listen, last night was strange. But we have explanations. Fear. Stress. A dream shared through proximity. It happens. She shook her head immediately. Not like that. Not the same image. Not the same details. I could not argue. My own skin crawled at the thought. We spent most of the day trying to distract ourselves. Chopping wood, cleaning the cabin, doing anything to avoid looking at the trees. But every task felt like moving through thick air. Every sound, even the normal ones, made us both turn our heads sharply. By late afternoon, I could not stand the not knowing. I grabbed my flashlight and told her I was taking a walk into the woods. She caught my arm. Do not go far. I will stay within sight of the cabin, I promised. But the moment I stepped into the woods, the world changed. The forest floor felt different beneath my boots. Softer, more fragile. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and something older, like the scent your mind connects to childhood woods even if you never walked through them. I swept the flashlight across the ground even though daylight still lingered. That was when I saw the marks. On a tree trunk, about shoulder height. Not claw marks, not scratches. Something smoother, more deliberate. Almost like a broad finger had pressed the bark inward without tearing it. A gentle imprint rather than damage. I ran my fingers over it. The bark was warm. Footsteps behind me made me turn quick. My wife appeared at the edge of the trail, breath visible in the cool air. "You were gone too long," she whispered. I felt something. Her voice cracked on the last word. She walked toward me slowly, looking at the trees as if they might close in at any moment. "Something has been circling this place for a long time," she said. "Long before we came back to the cabin." "Back?" I asked, frowning. She blinked rapidly, as if waking from a trance. "Why did I say that? We never lived here before." I stared at her. My heartbeat stuttered. The forest swayed gently though there was no wind. "We should go back inside," I said. She nodded, stepping closer. But as we turned, a sound rose behind us. A low, distant hum. Not mechanical. Not wind. More like a voice trying to speak through the earth. It pulsed faintly, a vibration felt rather than heard. My wife grabbed my arm hard enough to dig her nails into my sleeve. Then we heard it clearly. A memory. Not a sound. A memory forced forward like a wave. Suddenly we were back in that green field again. Sunlight washing everything in warm haze. A tall figure in the distance, half in shadow, half in gold light. Watching. Its presence peaceful but heavy, like a mountain breathing. My wife gasped and clutched her head. "It is not fake. It is not fake." The memory ended as abruptly as it came, leaving us both shaking. Back in the real woods, the hum faded. We hurried to the cabin. I locked the door out of instinct, even though wood and metal would never stop something as old and quiet as what we felt out there. As night settled over the valley, we sat on the edge of the bed. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then she said something that chilled me deeper than the whisper from the night before. "He is trying to show us something." "Who?" I asked softly. She looked at the trees beyond the window. Her voice was a breath. "The one from the memory." The forest seemed to lean closer. And in that moment, I knew the truth no longer belonged to the daylight or the rational world. Something ancient had stepped quietly into our minds and was rearranging the pieces. Not cruelly, not gently, but with purpose. And as the cabin darkened around us, a single thought settled into my chest like a cold stone. We were remembering something that did not belong to us. Or worse, we were remembering something that once did. There are things the mind can bury so deeply that you convince yourself they never existed. But there are other things, older things, that do not stay buried no matter how tightly you shut the door on them. Memories that are not yours. Memories that were placed inside you. Memories that belong to something far older than your name or your body. I learned that lesson in the years that followed that night at the cabin. I am recording this now because I need someone to hear the truth before I lose the rest of myself. Before the memories finish replacing what is left of who I used to be. After the whisper in the trees, after the shared dream that was not a dream, my wife and I stayed at the cabin only a few more nights. Each night brought new memories that slipped quietly into our minds. Not flashes, not dreams, full memories, intact, detailed, as if we had lived them. The forest was always there, moss thick underfoot, air cool and clean, fog drifting through sunbeams like slow-moving spirits. And always, without fail, he stood somewhere in the memory. Not close, not threatening, a tall figure at the edge of sight, watching, waiting, as if guiding us toward something we had forgotten. Some nights I woke with tears on my face, and I could not explain why. My wife stopped asking if the memories were real. She accepted them too quickly, as if something in her recognized them. One morning, she looked at me across the kitchen table with an expression so fragile it hurt to see. "I think he took something from us," she whispered. "A long time ago." I could not answer, because the same thought had been haunting me. We left the cabin and returned home, but the memories followed. They appeared in quiet moments, while washing dishes, while driving, while falling asleep. Always the same tall figure beneath the trees. Always the same strange warmth in my chest. Sometimes my wife woke in the night calling my name, not the name I have now but one I do not recognize. A name that felt like it belonged to someone who had lived beside that forest long before either of us were born. Weeks turned into months. I stopped speaking about it to anyone else. People in town already thought I spent too much time in the woods. Then one night, while my wife slept, I heard movement outside our bedroom window. Soft, heavy, slow, not walking, pausing, as if listening for my breath. I sat up in bed, heart racing. The curtains moved with a breeze that never touched my skin. The sound faded, and a memory rose. A memory so old it felt like it came from another life entirely. In it, I was a child again, running through a forest I had never visited. Moss brushing against my ankles, sunlight bright and warm, and Bigfoot was there beside me, not as a monster, not as a warning, as a guardian, as something ancient that had chosen me for reasons I still cannot understand. When I woke, my pillow was wet with tears. The next morning, I tried to talk to my wife, but she stared at me with distant eyes and said something that hollowed me out completely. "He wants us to remember everything." Her voice was calm, too calm, as if the fear had been replaced by acceptance. That was the day I realized the truth. These memories were not intrusions. They were returns. Something had been removed from our minds a long time ago. Something he was putting back now. Slowly, gently, carefully, like a parent showing an old photograph to a child who forgot who they once were. My wife and I drifted apart after that. Not from anger, not from betrayal, from memory. We were following different trails of something ancient that had chosen to reveal itself. Some days we woke remembering the same things. Other days the memories were different, like we had lived two separate pasts. I do not know what he wants from us. Protection, maybe, witnesses, or perhaps he is simply lonely in a world that no longer believes he exists. But I know this. Every night for the last year, I have heard him whisper outside the window. Not my name this time. Something older. Something that feels like a name I used to have. A name I almost remember. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, I hear my wife whispering it too in her sleep. I do not know whether he is giving us back what was taken or taking from us what we still have left. What I do know is this. The memory I thought was fake, the one we shared that first dawn, was real. We were children once in a forest older than any map. We walked beside him. We lived under his protection. And for reasons I may never understand, he erased himself from our minds. Maybe to keep us safe. Maybe to keep himself safe. Maybe both. Now he is giving everything back. And I fear the day the last missing memory returns. Because when it does, I am not sure I will still be the man who speaks into this recorder. I will leave you with the truth that haunts me most. The whisper my wife heard that first night, the one she thought came from the treeline, did not come from outside. It came from the memory he had just returned to her. And if I had not ignored that first whisper, if I had listened, I think I would already know the name he has been trying to make me remember. The name he once whispered to both of us long before we were born.